In this video, I'm going to break down the easiest and shortest path to transition into BIM management and coordination. And this is specifically going to apply to you if you're an architect or an engineer that is a current modeler. So if you work at a company currently doing modeling, drafting, anything BIM related, but you want to turn into a BIM coordinator, BIM manager in the future and level up like that, then this is the video that's going to explain exactly how you should make that transition and how I made that transition. And the way that I'm actually going to explain it to you is by using sort of a unique system which I found, and I'm going to use this diagram which is by Sam Ovens. He's a multi-millionaire, and he sort of explains this systems thinking. And so by the end of this video, you're going to understand how this applies to your career, and you will never be able to unsee it, right? I'm going to relate this to BIM management, coordination, and tie it in with Revit if you're an architect or an engineer. And just by understanding this, by the end of the video, you will not be able to unsee what you have just seen, right? And so it'll be so obvious to you exactly the path you need to take in order to transition. So you won't even need to actively think about it after the video, because just by listening to the video until the end, your decision-making process will be heavily influenced and altered, right? It's like if I showed you a new color, you would never be able to unsee that new color, but it's hard for you to imagine that color right now, right? So we'll come back to this in a second, because for this to make sense, I need to explain my three special pillars that I wrap around into this framework, okay? So if you don't understand that, you will not understand this. So make sure you don't skip any of this video. We have to go from step to step in order to get to this, where I finally explain this and it's gonna hit really well. So how to transition into a BIM management and coordination role from Revit, right? My opinion is that you should not be doing Revit modeling after 6 to 12 months of starting. Like if you started modeling as an architect or engineer, it's been 6 months, it's been 12 months, it's been maybe a year or 2 years, you should start to switch into BIM coordination. There's no need to be doing Revit modeling unless it's a passion thing for you, right? But a lot of us, me included, are not really doing this in terms of the passion we want to grow in our career. That is the passion, right? So the growth is the passion, not the modeling itself. So because of this, if we're growth oriented and we're looking for opportunities to grow in our career, what we want to do is we want to transition from Revit modeling to BIM coordination as soon as possible. You can learn everything you need to know about Revit, the ins and outs, and become a master within 6 to 12 months of working. And then after that, you should be doing coordination, right? So if you've been doing Revit modeling for over 3 years, then you actually haven't been maximizing your growth in your career. So you have to make sure that you start to switch into this skill set, which I'm going to lay out in this video, right? So again, this applies to you if you are an architect, MEP consultant, HVAC engineer, hydraulics engineer, fire engineer, civil engineer, electrical engineer. This all applies to you. So if you've been working for more than a few years in the industry, you should actually have had the opportunity to start working on coordination of projects, okay? That is what you need to be getting into. And so having said that, here are some of the projects which I was able to work on as a coordinator after 6 months of being a modeler. So I worked as a modeler for the first 6 months of my career, working full time, and I transitioned over to coordination. Just so you can understand what sort of things I've been working on. I've been working on in BIM 360 and the Autodesk Construction Cloud, using Revit, using Navisworks, and coordinating everything. These are the types of projects, right? So you have sports centers like this, you have hospitals which look like this, you have pavilions which look like this, and these are not just modeling in Revit. This is modeling in Revit, sending it to the Autodesk Construction Cloud, doing the whole clash detection on the Autodesk Construction Cloud so that we can design this virtually before it's designed on site. So we have no clashes at all, okay? That's the process behind it. Let's talk about your career growth now. Okay, so career growth is highly correlated with your level of skill and personal development, okay? And like, people don't break it down like this. People think it's to do with time, but I'll explain to you in a bit why it's not, okay? From my experience, career growth is correlated to your level of skill and personal development. So essentially, the quicker you develop these three things, your skills, your character traits, and your beliefs, the quicker you will grow in your career. And when people say it's about time, do not listen to them, because what time does is it gives you the medium to acquire these three things. It's not about time, it's about the acquisition of these three things, okay? So a lot of people think that career growth is related to time, like I said before, and you need to be in your career for 5 years in order to take the next step, okay? What does that mean? If you thought you need to be a modeler for 5 years before you get into coordination, you need to be a modeler for 10, 15 years before you get into coordination, this is the basic law. Work expands so as to fill the time available for its completion. This is Parkinson's law, okay? This is a law which was heavily studied, and papers were published based on this. And you probably know this as well. If I give you a deadline for you to learn something within 2 months, think back to your uni days or when you're doing an exam. You would wait until the last 2 months or like the last 2 weeks or 2 days even to cram something in before the exam. So this is obvious. You know this. Work expands to fill the time available for its completion. So your beliefs are going to dictate how quickly you evolve in your career. If you think you need to know modeling and be a modeler for 5 years before you transition into coordination and be a coordinator before you transition into project management, well then of course it's going to be like that, because that's the way you think. That's your bias, okay? So your beliefs are going to heavily influence this, and so the work is going to expand. You are going to take longer, right? The man who thinks is right and the man who thinks is wrong are both correct, because what you think is what will happen, okay? So let me ask you a question. If your career growth was correlated with time, like a lot of people say, why are there older people who stay as modelers and drafters for their whole life, and then there are younger people, younger than them, that are becoming managers and directors of companies, right? It doesn't make sense, because if what you said was correct, if you're thinking time is the reason that you grow in your career, then it means that you would get paid in accordance with your age rather than your skill, right? It doesn't make sense. So it doesn't make sense how there are younger people at higher up positions, in highly leveraged positions, than there are at older people that have more experience in the industry that are at lower level positions. It doesn't make sense if you think it's about time, right? If you think that was right, it means you probably would get paid according to your age, like I said before. So if you want to do really well in your career, you actually have to take a step back and stop thinking about it in terms of an employee mindset, but rather you have to think about it. You have to think about your career from a business or entrepreneurial mindset. And I like to bring this shift of business and entrepreneurship into your career, because you got to stop thinking as if you're doing this task in order to get to like you're just doing this task because you're paid to do it. But you have to think rather in terms of a business. Like, how does your task which you do influence the whole business, and how do you as an individual help the business grow? That's what you need to start thinking about. Because if I give you examples, right? We talked about how time is not the reason that you grow in your career. It's absolute garbage, right? Think about these people. Jeffy B, Zuck, and Muskie. All these people, when they were young, they became millionaires, and now they're billionaires, right? So like, if time was the reason, then why are these guys not 80, 90 years old? And then why are there people that are 80, 90 that are like not as wealthy or not as successful in their careers as these people, right? I might be taking an extreme example, but then you might be able to make the argument, okay, these people are business owners. So like, since they started a business, that's why they made a lot of money. And that's why they grew in their career. Not necessarily, because if you look at people like Sundar, who is the CEO of Google, right? He's an employee. He works for Google as the CEO. He's not the owner. He's not the founder of Google. But he's able to think about it in terms of an sort of a business entrepreneurial perspective rather than an employee. When you think of Sundar, you're not thinking he's an employee. You're thinking, okay, he's someone that has stake in the company, that makes key decisions regarding the company. And like, I'll tie this back into your career as a Revit draftsperson, modeler, and BIM coordination in a second. But it's important that you understand these things, because what I'm trying to say is, it's about how you think of your career, right? Don't think of your career in terms of an employee mindset. Think of it in terms of a entrepreneurial or business mindset. And what I mean by that is, I'm not saying start a business, because these people have had like business people, but Sundar is not. He's working for a company. He's an employee, but he still has an entrepreneurial mindset, if you understand what I mean, okay? It's a mindset. So you might be able to make the argument that these people got rich through business, but you and I both know that there's people out there making $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 a year by being directors, CEOs, managers of construction companies, or like, even think about your boss, right? How much is your boss getting paid? Probably over 150, 200K a year. And you might be thinking, oh, my boss is getting paid 200K a year and he actually works less than me, and he gets to take, he gets to take days off more than me, and like I'm working harder, but then like why am I getting paid less? It's to do with the mindset and how much value that person is bringing, right? Your boss is not working as a machine on a certain task to get a certain outcome for the business. Your boss is making decisions and helping the business grow. And so they're not paid based on their performance of their hourly rate. They're more paid based on outcome. So you have to start shifting into how do I provide a good outcome for the business I work at, rather than how do I spend time for the business I work at. And if you can make that shift, that's when your career will start to grow and you will start to see the path to BIM coordination and Revit. So I'll talk about BIM coordination in a second, because hopefully things are starting to click in your mind exactly how I'm telling you to think about this, right? Because if you think about it, the definition of a manager is someone that manages people and manages the company, right? BIM coordinator, BIM manager. He coordinates, she coordinates, he or she manages. What does that mean? What are they managing? Resources, people, company, finances, these things that need to be managed through a company, rather than a Revit drafts person who is just doing the modeling, right? They're doing what they're told. They're saying that you have to model it like this, so you do the modeling, but then a manager or coordinator is doing things for the sake of the company, for the sake of the process, right? So that is the shift that you need to start thinking. It's like you're no longer doing something that is helping you're no longer doing a task which is given to you. You're helping the company grow, right? And you have more stake, you have more responsibility. So hopefully you're starting to see that a thriving career is less about what your career path is, but it's more about what you choose to do, because you can mold the career path into however you want, okay? It's more about what you decide to do with your career and the skills and traits you try to develop, because the difference between someone that is doing less successful, if you want to say that, in their career, and someone like these people that are doing more successful in their career is the skills. So they learn the skills and they have a good deep understanding about everything, so they're able to make good decisions and actually start to grow the company, right? So if you think about the difference between you and your boss, the difference is they have some skill which you do not have, and that is the reason they're in that position and you are not in that position. So start to think, what are the skills I'm lacking? What are the skills I need to get in order to get into that position, right? So you can think of it like this, right? Like no one is going to care about your career as much as you do. So if you don't take the responsibility and start to learn the skills consistently, then no one actually is going to do it for you, because it's not in their interest, and it's not in the company's interest to make you personally develop your skill set, but it's only in your interest. So if you don't actually have a plan for your life, and like, I want to learn these skills and I'm going to try and get into this opportunity, I'm going to try and get into this career path, I'm going to start to excel this way, then, you know, you're not going to grow. Like there's a saying that I've heard, I'm probably going to butcher it, but they say something like, if you're not growing, you're dying. So there's nothing called being stagnant. You're actually going less, because if you think of growth in terms of relativity, like growth means you're growing compared to something that you were before. So the person that is the same person you were 5 years ago and the same person you are now, if you are doing the same thing in your career, it means you have grown, like relatively, you're actually doing worse than you were doing 5 years ago, because you developed other character traits, but you haven't developed your career. So your career is relatively doing worse because you had less traits back then 5 years ago, but you're in the same position, okay? So think about it in terms of relative sense as well. This is not Warren Buffett. This is Charlie Munger. And Charlie Munger says, I constantly see people rise in life who are not the smartest, sometimes not the most diligent, but they're just learning machines. So he understood, and this guy's net worth was 2.6 billion before he died. He understood the importance, and he was, by the way, if you don't know who he is, he was the chief lieutenant at Berkshire Hathaway. So like Warren Buffett's whole thing. And his net worth was 2.6 billion. And a lot of these people heavily invest in education, learning, and all this stuff as well, right? So like they always talk about being learning machines and upskilling and learning new skills. So you actually have the correct capacity to move on to the next position, right? The reason this is so important is because as you transition from draftsperson to modeler or like draftsperson or a modeler to coordinator or manager, you're actually transitioning into a role that heavily impacts the growth of the company. So essentially, you need to stop thinking like an employee, start thinking like a coordinator. I already talked about that. What does it even mean to stop thinking like an employee and start thinking like a coordinator, right? It's got nothing to do with the fact that you are employed or you are doing a business. It's to do with your mindset. So I call this employee mindset and BIM manager mindset. So again, let's look at this quote, right? Those who keep learning will rise in life. This Charlie Munger's quote, $2.6 billion guy. And so these are the differences between the employee mindset and the BIM manager mindset. So if you make these mindset shifts and you learn the skills, you will become a BIM manager. It's like, it'll just happen. So the employee mindset learns the skills required for the job. Like you'll get on the job and you'll be like, okay, I need to learn Revit. Let me just learn that. But then the BIM manager constantly is looking to improve and learn more skills. So like, okay, let me learn Revit, but then what's my boss doing? My boss is doing some project setup and coordination. How do I learn that? Let me go and ask that person. Okay, let's ask that person, and then that person's going to teach me. What if he doesn't teach me? Okay, if he doesn't teach me, I'm going to go and find it online. When I find it online, I'm going to learn how to do the thing, and then I'm going to go and tell my boss, hey, can I do the thing for you? It's going to actually save you time because I can do it now. You save time. I get to learn through the company. And so the company saves money because you can do something more highly leveraged, okay? Win-win-win for all three parties. So like that's a smart way that you have to start thinking. If you want to become a BIM manager, you have to embody what the BIM manager does, right? So constantly looking to improve and learn more skills. The second thing, the employee mindset is, does the task they're paid for? They think, this is just my job. I'm just going to do it because that's what I'm paid for, right? I'm just going to model this section of the building because, that's my job. But a BIM manager goes above and beyond by taking higher leverage work from people ahead of them. Like I said before, you go to your boss and say, hey, I already learned this, by the way. Can I just do it for you? It's going to save you time. It's going to make me learn. So it's a win-win, right? Things like that. And then the employee mindset doesn't put themselves in a collaborative environment because the employee just wants to sit down and do the work behind the desk and not talk to anyone. But the BIM manager goes, he always wants to, or she always wants to work on a collaborative endeavor, okay? Because it's coordination management with everyone, collaborating with everyone. And they are naturally, I don't like to use the words introvert, extrovert, but they naturally seek to learn from others, right? In a social setting because they know growth comes from that. So what else does a BIM manager what else is the BIM manager mindset? So a BIM manager always is looking for skills which allow them to add value to the company, right? Don't think about your skills in terms of this skill allows me to get paid this much. That's not how you should think about it. You need to start thinking about it in terms of this skill provides this much value to the company I work at. So if you're thinking about like Revit, you've been thinking about Revit in terms of Revit is a $100,000 skill set, and once I learn Revit, I can make this much money. But you got to think about it in terms of how much does Revit help the company save, right? Have you even thought about that, right? Or a BIM manager will go, okay, instead of going, and this is the shift, right? Because when you are a Revit modeler, it's hard for you to think about what value you bring to the company because there's no before and there's no after. Right? Because people did do AutoCAD and stuff beforehand, but there is sort of some quantifiable thing. It's hard for you to imagine. But when you're a BIM manager, you're doing coordination. And when you do coordination, if something goes wrong, you know that you have to scrap it on site and manufacture it. So you're saving the company. If it wasn't coordinated, you know for a fact that you would have to redo everything on site and it would cost millions of dollars. So you know straight away when you become a BIM manager and you're doing coordination, like BIM coordinator, BIM manager, you know that you're saving the company millions and millions of dollars. So that's why you start to naturally think, right? That's why it's hard because you have to shift the way you think in order to get there. You naturally start to think, okay, I have the BIM manager skill set, BIM coordinator skill set. I helped the company save this much money because it's so obvious because I coordinated this project and then this instance, we were going to have a clash here. And like I prevented all of them. So I saved the company like $10 million this year. You can think of it like that, but that comes naturally when you're put into that position. So I'm just trying to tell you how to think as someone that is already a BIM coordinator, okay? BIM coordinators always looking to improve themselves personally so that they're capable of making higher quality decisions, okay? Because when you get further on into your career is going to be about the decisions you make rather than the time you spend. So you need to make strategic decisions which drive the business that you work for in the correct direction, in the correct path, Okay, so if you're personally developing, learning how to communicate, learning how to negotiate, learning how to manage emotions, learning how to break bad news, deliver good news, and then all this stuff, those are not like things you learn technically from your job. These are things that you need, like interpersonal relationships, right? You learn these and you sort of do self-development over time. You are going to like get better and better, and then that's what allows you to open up into project management and directors and CEOs and all that. Those positions is the relationships, but that all starts with skills. Okay, because you need to learn the skill in order to get the opportunity, in order to get the ultimate goal, whatever your goal is in life, right? So let's go back to what I talked about before. So we talked about skills, character traits, and beliefs. Let's take an example of transitioning from Revit to BIM, and let's break it down using these 3 pillars, right? So if you are a current Revit modeler and you learn the technical skills of the BIM Manager, now you will be able to take any technical tasks when you are given the opportunity. So like before, if your boss said, hey, can you do, like if your boss is busy and says, hey, can you do this? Right? Or if you want to apply to a job, you can't even write on your resume that you did BIM coordination. If you can't even write like that you have the skill set. You might be have worked for 5 years, but you don't know how to do the BIM coordination stuff. So then how are you going to write on your resume that you know how to do the thing, right? So learn the skill first, then you can start writing that stuff. Or when the opportunity presents to yourself at work, you can start to work on it, right? So then what happens is your skills develop, right? The second thing, character traits. If you are a current Revit modeler and you learn the character traits of a BIM modeler, communication, time management, negotiation, dealing with bad emotions, good emotions, speaking to people, charisma, all of that stuff, now you will be able to act like a BIM modeler. Or not a BIM modeler, a BIM coordinator or BIM manager. Okay, so essentially what's happened now is you have the skills. So if someone says, hey, can you set this project up and do a clash detection? You know how to do it. Then you've also learned how to communicate and like do all this time management stuff. So now you also know how to embody what a BIM manager, BIM coordinator does, right? So now you have both of those things. You essentially are a BIM manager. And what that'll do in turn is it'll change the way your brain works. Your beliefs will start shifting because you learn the skills. So it'll be so obvious that you know how to do it. Then like you will embody the character traits. So you will be someone that knows how to speak to people and manage people and do like a management of a project. So then you'll start to be like, okay, your brain over time will start to shift and be like, this is now my identity. I'm no longer a modeler. I'm starting to transition into coordination management, right? And so the thing is, it's hard to explain, but you have to believe that it's possible, right? If you think the only path to becoming BIM coordinator, BIM manager is after 5 years or 10 years of modeling, then you're always going to show up like the person who is not the BIM manager. And your goal is to show up like the person who is the BIM manager, because that person is going to, over time, mold their beliefs into that path, and you're going to get the thing, right? You will get the thing as soon as you believe you deserve it. So, and the way you deserve, because it's not some woo-woo stuff, like the way that you know you deserve it is after you have told yourself and you know for a fact you've learned the skills and you know for a fact that you've learned the character traits. But the only way you will learn the character traits is when you're put into positions, like at work. You will learn the character traits of coordination and management when you are put into positions where you have to coordinate and manage slowly, okay? But you won't even be put into that position if you don't have the skill. So what is the first domino which does all the other dominoes? It's the skills. Because as soon as you knock skills down, then you start getting opportunity. Every single time your character trait improves, and then your beliefs about yourself change. Now you start to think, okay, I can actually apply for a job as a BIM coordinator. I can actually level up into the next part of my career, right? So that's what it is. What's the first domino? It's skills, learning the skills. It's the most important thing. So, because out of the 3 we actually talked about, we only have full control over our skills. And the reason I say that is because in order for you to develop character traits, you actually have to shift your identity. And you might even say that you are the person that deserves. You can say like, I am deserving of a BIM coordinator, but like you can say it, but subconsciously you won't actually believe it. And you have a lot of blockages. So like the only way, this is not you, this is everyone, human psychology. The only way you will ever shift your identity into like being able to be confident and not being scared about this is if you learn and grow your skills, because you have to genuinely believe it, and you have to have a stack of undeniable proof so that you know you are that person that can manage, coordinate, and do that stuff, right? And in order for us to change the way we think, we actually need evidence as to why we are that person. This is something Alex Hormozi, who is another business guru, always says, right? You have to be action-oriented, and this is the only way. You need to build a stack of undeniable evidence so that you believe who you want to be. Like, you believe that you believe that you are that person that you say you are. Tongue twister. So let's finally come back to this, because now that I've explained all of this will actually start to make a lot of sense to you, right? So we have an input, we have a process, we have an output, we have feedback. This is an internal system in your mind. This is for everything in the whole environment, but this is actually also in your mind, because this is how we process things. As when we were young, this has been our whole conditioning, right? When you were young, you would do something, your mom or your dad would say something, you would process that, you would have an output, and then you would get feedback, and then you'd be like, okay. So then you do another thing, and then you would process it, you get an output, you would get feedback. And then like every single time, you would start to change the input. So you will try to optimize the inputs so you get the output that you want, okay? We're always trying to optimize for the output that we want, naturally. So what is actually in your control? What is in your control are the inputs. You can't control the process, because for most of us is internally. We can't change the way that we think, right? Or we can't change the way a lot of things are. We can't process the output, because the way we think influences the inputs, and then it gets you the output. So in order to change the output, you have to either change the input or the process. We know we can't change the process. And the feedback is sort of an internal loop that you think it's sort of like confidence. Think about it as confidence. If, for example, I taught you something and you were so confident that you knew the BIM coordination skill set, then the feedback in your mind will be the feeling of confidence, and that will go back into your input. And then every single time you speak to someone, you will come across with confidence. Okay, so this is the whole thing. But the only thing I want you to understand is the only thing you can control is the input. So you have to find the things to put into here so that this starts to get optimized. Okay, so let's just say that we did this, and I'm going to make this a bit bigger. Let's say that I taught you how to set up projects on BIM 360. This is the BIM coordinator skill set, by the way, all these things, okay? This is what a BIM coordinator will do. Right now, you might not know how to do these things, but let's say I taught you how to set up projects on BIM 360. Input goes into the process. I show you the process. The output, feeling confident, back into the input, okay? So like, in order for you to start this process, you need an input initially. So what you will do is I will show you how to set up projects on BIM 360 so that you understand this whole process and you come back to here. But then when you get that opportunity at work, you can do it again, and you can do it again, and you can do it again. You get better and better and better at it, okay? So what we're trying to do is every single time we learn a new skill, it adds into the input, and it goes through the process, and it goes through the output, and the feedback gets better because you get way more confident about your skill set when you do it like that, right? So the thing is, you need to get good at these things. It doesn't take long to get good at these things, but you need a few iterations. But you're never going to be able to get good in the first place until you start. So you need to actually start. It's like the first domino that you drop. Like, you need to start by giving yourself an input in order for you to output that you are a BIM coordinator. In order for your output to over time be that you are a BIM coordinator, you need to add this into your input. So like right now, your input is only you do Revit. You're like a Revit drafts person, like Revit Modeller. When you add this BIM 360 that you know how to do that, then like that's going through the whole loop. Then you add, okay, learn how to set up projects for Revit for collaboration. Now you're adding like 3 things into your skill set. So like now what's happening is what's the feedback? The feedback is altering the way you think about yourself, right? It's altering the output. Learn how to set up coordination workspace. Again, you're adding every single thing. How to use Revit, the MEP basics, how to run a clash detection, how to assign clashes. By the time you get to that end, you've added so many things into this system that the output is that you are very confident in your ability to get the job done, and that you are now start to embody the BIM coordinator, BIM manager skill set. What does that mean? That means that if we talk about these three things, you've inputted all your skills, so your character traits and your beliefs start to morph over time, right? It goes through the process, and over time, it starts to change the way you see yourself. So like that is the circular process and the nature of that, okay? So think of this, think of it like this, right? Before you got the job that you currently work at, which is you might be working as a modeler, or let's just say that you're a student, you're not even a Revit modeler. Let's just say you got a job that you are happy to get at the start. You got that job and you were like, oh, I got this job, this is pretty good. But after like 3 or 4 years, you know that if you lose that job, it'll be so easy to get another job. I remember when I was in uni, I was in high school, it was a big deal to get a job at like one of those big retail brands, right? And then everyone would be like, he got that job at that retail brand, that's pretty cool. But now after 3 or 4 years, when you look back at it, getting that job is very easy. But then back then it had a lot of status. It was hard. It's because your identity changes and you transcend what you believe is possible over time. So then getting that thing that you had before was super easy, right? Think about it like this, right? As a graduate, or like as someone that started their career, think about your job currently. When you got that job, the amount of excitement that you had getting that job as a modeler. You get to use Revit, go to work and do this thing, right? Over time, over 3 or 4 years, now if you actually stop your job, you know you can get another job for the same thing. You might not be able to get a raise, or like as in like a raise in your career growth, but you'll be able to get another job as a modeler, as a draftsperson, because you know that's your identity has become that. But initially at the start, if I said, can you get like 3 or 4 of those jobs if you don't get this one job? You'll be like, no, I can't. This is the one job I can get. So like your identity shifts over time because you give yourself evidence and you go through this process, right? And you take the output, put it back into the feedback loop, and it's like all internal in your brain. And then over time, you start to believe that you can do the thing, and it gives you evidence to believe. So your identity has shifted. When you go to work, you start to do things on different projects, and you start to tell yourself, I definitely can do this. Like I have the traits of a modeler, and I have the belief that I am a modeler. And then so that's why you are a modeler right now. So in order for you to transcend into the next step in your career, transition from Revit into BIM coordination, all you need to do is you need to understand that it's about skills, because that's the first domino that drops everything else. So what I would say is, let's go back down here, is the place to start is by learning the skills. So I put a list of skills here, and this is what will start to alter this process, okay? You want to add to the feedback when it goes back into the input. You need to add into the feedback, and it goes over and over in a loop. You'll be stuck in the same loop, and you will never be able to transcend into like BIM coordination, management, project management, anything, unless you take the next immediate step in your career. And the only way you're going to do that is by learning skills. So you need to learn skills and prioritize speed, and always be hungry to learn new things. And if you can do that over time, it'll be very clear that you'll be able to take the steps, and it'll be it'll seem like it happened effortlessly, but it didn't. You only focused on learning, and the learning, the byproduct of the learning is that your career grows, obviously. But a lot of people after school, they'll learn during high school, they'll learn during uni, and then after that, when they get into their career, they'll sort of stop learning and they'll just do what they're told. So they'll start to feel stagnant. So if you're interested in learning the exact skills, I have a 4-step framework. I talk about 4 levers of BIM growth. I have that video linked somewhere below where I go through exactly how to become a BIM coordinator in 6 months, how I did that. This video was so I can tell you the framework of how to think. And so the next video, which I've linked down below, will tell you exactly how to do it. So like you can go and then you can implement all those 4 things, and you can start to see progress very quickly, okay? So if you want to learn how to do all these things, speak to me. We talk about your career. You can book a call below, or I don't know, it's linked somewhere on my channel somewhere if you can go find it. We will be able to get on a call, have a chat about your future, your career, what you want to learn, what skills you're lacking, put a plan in place, and then we can work one-on-one and get you that outcome, right? So if you're interested in that, it's linked somewhere. But yeah, either book a call or watch my free BIM training, which I've linked down below, and I'll see you guys in the next video. See ya.